Okay, it's time to start, I think. Welcome to Gendispatch. Just a little introduction, as this session is totally virtual. This session is being recorded, and make sure, please, that your video is off, even if your camera is covered. Mute your microphone unless you're speaking, and use the WebEx chat only to join the mic queue. So for any other conversation you might want to have, there is the jabber. The blue sheet in this is in the Etherpad, which I have linked both in the WebEx chat and in the jabber. It helps if you state your name before speaking, even if you will be introduced by the queue manager, who is me in this case. And if you can't speak, feel free to use the jabber and preface your comment with mic, and it will be reported via audio. We are also monitoring the jabber chat. So if you use +1 in the jabber chat, please make sure to write what you are +1 for, so that we can keep track of what's your opinion. And let's also try to keep most important comments and conversation and discussion at the mic, so that the presenter also doesn't miss what's being said in the jabber. So let's try to have one conversation. But it's fine if you also ask questions or clarification that you don't think are important enough to report to the audio in the jabber chat. To make management easier, I wanted to ask you to try to keep the question to the end of the session or the presentation. But you can always bring up clarification questions if you think are important to have at any time. I think I covered everything I wanted to say. Please do sign the blue sheet. Again, they're at the end of the Etherpad. And we have a minute taker. Thank you, Rich. And the jabber's cry. Thank you, Bron. So, Pete.
All right. A reminder, even though we are halfway through the week, that one should note well, this is an IETF session, virtual or otherwise, so all of the IETF participation rules apply. If you are not aware of these, please make yourself aware before you start participating in the working group by saying anything or typing anything into the Jabber room or otherwise. In particular, know that there are things about code of conduct and anti-harassment, and in particular, patents and copyrights and things, all sorts of intellectual property rules. So please check those out if you have not already. So we are doing Gendispatch today. Just to point out, these should all now be pasted into the Jabber chat. If anybody needs those, please let us know in the Jabber chat. We can repaste them. And they are also available on the meeting materials website. So here is our agenda. We are open for bashing. Basically, other than what Francesca and I have been mumbling about, Mirya is going to present on the update tag. Brian and/or Stephen may be presenting on the eligibility issues, and then we're going to have open mic. Anybody have any additions or changes to the agenda that they would like to bring up? Yay, moving right along. The next presentation will be Mirya's. Let me find the right one. New tags. New tags, yay. And let me just go to slideshow if I can. Where did slideshow go? Ah, because the other one is not done with its slideshow. Sorry about that. Let me go.
Command F should do it as well, I think. No, maybe you didn't click on the winner.
Yeah, we gotta we've got to stop the slideshow from this. Come along, no. How do we end the slideshow? We go to the bottom, we get the tools.
You know what? I just stopped talking anyway.
Start talking, and I'll get to this. Okay.
Yes. So I'm Mia Kulevint. So the draft we're talking about is Suresh and I wrote them together, and the reason why we came up with this because there are many discussions over and over again over the years in the IHG and with the authors about what the update tag in a draft means, if it should be used or not or whatever. The backstory here is that the ISG is aware of this problem, and so they also tried or proposed an ISG statement which basically said, sorry, but update is not well defined. So just to make you all aware of that, we sent this proposed ISG statement to the mailing list, and we got a lot of feedback that that's not helpful, and we would rather like to have a clear definition of the update tag. So just to little recap what the update tag does currently. So it's a tag. It's still the slide, the previous one. So it's a tag that you can add to a draft to link another RFC to a new RFC, an existing RFC to a new RFC. And then when this draft gets published as an RFC, also the already published RFC gets new metadata tag saying it has been updated by, so that people looking at the old RFC know that there's a newer RFC which has some additional information to it. And as I briefly said already, the problem is just like it's not this. The meaning of this tag is not well defined. There's no RFC explaining what the meaning is or no official definition of it. So the consequence of this was that it's used for very different purposes currently, and that's really confusing because people don't know if they should use it or not, and there's a lot of inconsistency in the RFC series. So now you can go to the next slide. So what we have currently is that, for example, a lot of groups, they actually use the update tag for something that they want to be mandatory to implement because it's something like a bug fix or something really important that needs to be added to an existing protocol. Other groups, for example, also use the update tags for things which are more optional extensions, which use existing extension points in the protocol, or for version updates. Sometimes for new versions updates is used, sometimes not. So it's very inconsistent. And the main problem here and the main discussion we always have, what does it mean for implementation? Is something that updates another document or another RFC mandatory to implement, or like how should implementers see this and behave? Next slide. So what we propose in this draft is not to define the updates tag because it's already used for all these different use cases. So like one single definition wouldn't help. What we propose is to instead define 3 new tags. So one would be amends, which is actually this mandatory to implement change to an RFC. So that's something that's more than an errata, but it's still something like a bug fix or a change of behavior where the experience has shown this needs to be changed. And here, like we have actually in the draft currently some normative language saying this must be implemented. We know that, of course, old implementations who are not aware of the new document will not like magically change, but at least somebody who is newly implementing a protocol should also implement or must also implement the updating RFC. The second tag is the extend tag. So that's an optional extension, something like using an existing extension point with a new option. And here it's really, the purpose really is to really have a link from the base spec to these kind of extensions. So people who are implementing the base spec, they are aware that there are these kind of extensions that might become handy for their use case and that they might want to implement as well, but there's kind of no necessity to implement it. And then the third tag we propose is a little bit the one for all these other cases, or something which is called see also, which is really like, if you read this RFC might be interesting for you as well. And there are a couple of cases where this is really useful, especially for informational RFCs. So it's really just adding a link to an existing RFC to a new RFC. Next slide.
I think there's someone in the queue who might have a clarification question.
Linux. I'm not sure it's a clarification or what, but the situation that I've run into sometimes is a situation where you have a base spec that says must not do X, and then somebody writes an extension where it's may do X if negotiated. So the argument was it's not just an extension because it's actually violating a must not in the original spec, but obviously it's only if you negotiated it. So would that be extended or amended or something else?
So I think that really depends on, if you think this is like a mandatory to implementing or not. Is it, if you implement the base spec, is it mandatory to also implement this extension because otherwise it doesn't have the behavior you would like to see on the network today? Or is it really just like something that is optional for a certain use case?
Generally, it's optional for a certain use case, but it's, I think the example is, like all the must be zero fields you have. I
understand.
You don't understand, yeah.
So if it's really, if it's meant as an existing extension point to a protocol, it should be extends.
But I guess you might have a situation where the two endpoints, it's optional, but if you have somebody in the middle who's trying to do like, protocol enforcement or whatever, then maybe it's not. So that's
so I think also this I'm not sure if there's a direct correlation between use of normative language and use of these tags. I see a lot of people in the queue now.
Okay.
Also Suresh, who is my co-author. But maybe I should just go to the end of the presentation because I have too much slides and then take all the questions.
Let's do that.
I'm not sure. Suresh is in the queue and he might want to add something to this specific point. So.
Yeah, actually, yes. I think this is like more a signal, Jonathan, for like implementers. If they look at the original RFC at some later point in time, if we know of like breaking updates that like, we want them to implement, that's what the signal. So this like must be zero and middle box, like trying to enforce something is like not a problem. This is going to solve it all. But the idea is like, imagine we found some kind of bug in the original RFC and we fixed it. We don't want somebody looking at the old RFC to not know about the existence of the new one. Thank you.
Okay, but Media, you can continue with the presentation and we take the questions at the end then.
Thank you, that's perfect. So what are the other things that the draft says? So it says like if you use these tags, you should only or you must only use them with the defined meaning in the draft. But of course, it's not mandatory to use the tabs. So if you write an extension, you can use those tags, but there's like no obligation to do so. Still, then as the same as with updates today, it doesn't make any existing RFC invalid. As I explained already, it's a mandatory to implement thing. But of course, if you have an existing implementation, that's still compliant to the RFC that you implement because you don't change the RFC. So this is the same with updates, and that also causes a lot of confusion. It doesn't change anything here by using these more well-defined tags. Of course, or like this question came up on some list, is tags can only be referenced to RFCs and not to external resources. Understand that like having a reference to an external resource can be useful as well sometimes, but I think we need a different mechanism or a different tag for it maybe. So those tags here are only for referencing RFCs. Then there is no restriction on the status or maturity level between the RFCs. So for example, you can have an information RFC that amends or extends a proposed standard RFC. We have those cases in this year. Sometimes it makes sense. All I'm saying is that this document doesn't make any restrictions here. If any future restrictions are needed, then that should be a different document or a different topic. There are also no requirements on like how an amendment should look like because all this new old style or old new style kind of notation, or some RFCs who currently update other RFCs just use text. We don't do any requirements on this in this RFC. I think that's also a separate topic, and there is actually a separate draft for this. And then we also, for the amends and for the extends tag, we follow or we recommend the same guidelines as we have for updates today, which says this should be mentioned in the abstract and in the introduction. Also, we provide further recommendations that you provide additional information about these RFCs that update another RFC. This is not applicable to see also. See also is like very loosely, and it's really just a link, and you don't have to mention it much if you don't want to, but you may. Okay, final slide. So we, as I said, this came out of the ISG and some discussion we had on the IETF ad mailing list based on this ISG statement or the proposed ISG statement. We got some feedback that people think this is useful already, but it's only a small number of people, so we definitely want more feedback before we move ahead here. So first question is really, do people think this is useful? Or at least do people think this is more useful than the current updated tag we have? Then currently, with a note in the draft that this should need further discussion, but currently the draft also states that with the publication of the draft SRC, the update tag will be obsoleted. It should not or must not be used anymore. Our idea behind this was to avoid this confusion that we have currently and really have a clear switch over. But people have also raised opinions that they think it would be too early to deprecate updates and we still need it. I would really like to see a sharp cut because otherwise it kind of blurs the usability or the function of having clear definitions if you still have this very undefined tag there. Another open question was, do other streams want to adapt these tags as well, or are they useful for other streams? Currently, the RFC is only proposing this tag for the IETF stream because, you know, we are an IETF group, we're discussing it here, and that's also where we got feedback so far. But we also talked to the other stream editors or stream managers, and they were quite positive about it. So we could probably extend it to all streams if people think that's a good idea. There's one point about updating eventually the RFC style guide and the version 3 vocabulary. That's just an open point. We need to decide what to do on it. And then there was a little question about how well do these tags apply to process documents, and we should figure out if they apply well or if there's something else that needs to be covered and give some examples how that can be done in the draft, which is also an open issue or an open to do right now. And that's the end of my presentation now.
Thank you, Mirja. So we have a lot of people in the queue, so I'll ask you to be brief. First one is JCK. Can you please state your name as well?
John Clinton. I admire the amount of effort and thinking that has gone into this, but I'm very concerned that except for C also, each of these categories leads to hair splitting about marginal cases that may turn out to be more confusing than it's worth. And that in turn takes us down the path that we've tried to go down before with applicability statements, which actually provide explanations of what these things are about, and the notorious new track effort, which attempted to sort these things out in a different way. I'm quite concerned that if we do this as a substitute for those other things, we will just dig ourselves in deeper in spite of the fact. Again, I think the effort and thinking is very worthwhile and the idea ought to be good. Thanks.
Thanks, John. So I totally see your concern here. I just would like to add that the same problem applies to the current situation where we're in. That we have a lot of hair splitting about, I mean, that's a base problem we try to at least improve, that we have a lot of hair splitting about if updates should be used or not. And because every group and every person actually has their own definition about what update should be or should not be. And sometimes they're very patient about it and they really say, no, you can only use it in this case and I don't want to use it otherwise. And then yeah. I had very long discussions with people going back and forth and so on and say, it's not defined, you don't have to, right? So my hope was at least having those new tags, the situation could improve. It might not improve, it might stay as worse as it is, but at least there's a chance for improvement. I don't think it will get worse.
Yeah, well, I'm concerned about the possibility it could get worse as we try to, as somebody tries to navigate through a large collection of documents. Mm-hmm. And as I told Sean in Jabber chat, the first person I heard complaining about the lack of definition of the updates tag was John Pastel. This has been a very long-standing problem.
Yeah, point taken. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Next in queue is Spencer.
Thank you. This is Spencer. Honestly, we've had so many different ways of verifying, of using updates. I'm almost ready to suggest deprecating that now. Would it make more sense if we deprecated updates and even all other tags as well in RFC text and move this all to metadata?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but these tags are metadata.
Just like one clarification there, Spencer, and this is like a thing, sorry, this is Suresh Krishnan. One of the things that we like we thought these as tags and other time as like metadata, but there's like a significant difference that I think Brian Carpenter brought up in like one of the discussions we had over email. The updates is actually part of the RFC. It's actually
that's what I mean. Yes.
Right. It's an immutable part of the RFC, exactly. But the updated is not. Updated is a metadata tag. So I think the rendering of the metadata can be separate, but like one of each of these tags is going to be an immutable text of the RFC, and the other one is going to go into some of the RFC as metadata.
Yeah, actually that's true, and it also doesn't make sense because usually in the draft or then RFC that updates another RFC, you also are supposed to mention in the abstract and introduction why you update this document, and like this information is inherent in the RFC, right? It's not something you can rip off the RFC anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking about the linkage, but it seems like to me that, I mean, the other thing is we've got so many people that are in queue that are former area directors who have had conversations about this while they were on the ISG. You know, just the amount of time that we saved for the ISG would be worth doing this. But I really wonder if it's time for us to stop putting stuff in immutable RFCs that's not going, you know, that's not going to be complete. And things like updates, things like updates and things like that. Well, or it's like you're gonna have to use the tools that produce that show you the metadata, not just the RFC text, in order to figure out what's going on anyway. And I know we're not talking about errata, but we've had those conversations also. So it's like I'm
definitely open for a better solution. I don't have one.
No. I think this is an improvement over the way we've done updates in the past. And like every time we try to touch updates, it's like, well, but it doesn't work for RFC 9 or something. That's all the that's all the way back, and so no, we never did anything. So this is an improvement. It's changing the vocabulary that we're arguing about, instead of arguing about the same vocabulary, which is an improvement. And like I say, I wonder if focusing, this stuff is all going to be metadata. We're not going to put it in the text of the RFCs, and you're really going to need to use the tools that show you the metadata to get a really clear picture of what's going on. Because if you're just looking at the RFC text, you're not getting that anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next in queue is Mohit.
Hi, this is Mohit. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I'll try to be brief because we are short on time. I had three points, and you can listen to them and maybe then either keep them for a future update or answer now. It's up to you. So one thing from your presentation and also from the draft, which I thought could benefit a bit more, is to explain the relationship between amended by and obsoleted by. I'm sure there is a difference, but perhaps like explicitly stating what's the difference between obsoleted by and amended by would help me. My second comment was about C also. I am a bit worried that it may lead to like all kinds of misuse. So of course I have an academic background and I want everyone to cite my papers and look at my protocols. So I'm thinking like if I go and like ask the IESG that sometimes we have competing protocols, and if I want that, hey, my competitor's protocol should also have C also, and then people should be redirected to me or to my protocol. And to give a concrete example, I think Suresh has been AD on one of my drafts on this. address protected neighbor discovery, which is basically IoT version of neighbor discovery, and should I go and say see also on basically neighbor discovery for IPv6 on every draft? I'm not sure. And my third comment was, which I'm still not certain if the IESG has thought about, is cyclical kind of updates. So this, again, using the example of address protected neighbor discovery, is updating RFC 8505, which updates RFC 6775. So in this case, like, should it update both, or should it update only the latest one, and how this would then move when you have like even more tags like amended by, do you carry over these things, is something that I could benefit from some clarification. So those were my comments. Feel free to answer them now or like take them later on.
Media, do you want me to take this? I can give
Sure.
a quick answer. So for the obsoleted by, there's like a big difference, right? Like obsoleted means the old document is like no longer in use, don't use it, like it's dead, right? And the amended by means like, you know, the old one is still good, but there's some changes that are required. It's the same relationship between obsoleted by and updated by today, right? The old one is whether it's still valid or not, right? For the
There is actually an ISG statement clarifying that, which we probably should change if we publish this document. Yes.
Right. For the second one, for the C also, obviously there's like quite a bit of like, you know, these things are going to go on. And I think it's like we threw this up because like people did want like a lightweight way of referencing things. There's going to be gatekeeping on this, right? This is not really something that people can throw willy-nilly. Like you still have to go through the chairs of the working group and the IESG, and they'll say like, oh, why are you doing this? So there's some kind of back pressure. And for the last thing, the update, I don't call it cyclical, but it's recursive, right? You know, you could, document A could update B, and B could be like, you know, updating C,
that's
right?
better. Recursive is the right term, sorry.
Right, yeah, so I think that's already there too. So that's like, so we're trying to keep things like at least as good as they are. Like when we go for, other than like the stuff John brought up, right? This is not bringing up any new failure cases. That's kind of the answer. So your points stand, but it's like no different than today.
Yeah, that's true. And there is a risk that you see more use of C also than we see of today update today. But that might also be good, right? Because sometimes update is not used today where it would be useful. And at least for IETF stream documents, we have in the ISG a lot of comments on our reviews saying, shouldn't this update something, or this should maybe not update? So there is like somebody who does another check on it.
Just consider the overhead on
sorry.
IESG. Sorry. I'm done.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you. We have a lot of people and not a lot of time, so please really try to shorten your comment. Now is Mark.
Mark Nottingham. I'll try. I have comments in roughly 3 areas. Could you go back to the slide that proposes the different tags? Lovely, thank you. So first of all, it's really hard to comment about this without data. I know we have a lot of anecdotal experience, but my understanding was that from Jabber conversation that Suresh had done a survey, and I know it's a subjective judgment, but some data about how we use updates would really inform this decision. So I'm a little disappointed not to see that in the presentation. But just going off of this, you know, amends and amended by seems like kind of what most people think of updates. So if we need a new term, that would be appropriate. It's not clear we need a new term though. We need, like I said, we need to see the data. Extends and extended by, I thought this is why we had registries. If everything that registers something now needs to say what it extends up in the header, we're going to have pretty busy headers. And likewise, see also, I thought that's why we had references. If we need to now have references up in the header as well, that's going to be pretty busy. But stepping back in my third and I think last comment for now, you know, as far as I'm aware, you know, all the different countries in the world with statutory law systems, there's common law, or so all have statutory law set out in a way where it's updated in place. And so you look and you can see the latest version of the legislation integrated with all of the amendments. For some reason, we don't do that. I don't know why, but this kind of feels like a Band-Aid more than anything. And I'd rather get at the real disease rather than just sticking a Band-Aid on it.
So 2 points. I think on your first part, you illustrated very well the problem, because you said you are really sure that the way we use updates today is amends, and that's not what everybody's sharing, because there's no definition for it. And that's the whole problem, that some people think updates is used for extend, some people think it can only be used for amends.
Show me the data,
also
please.
use it in it.
I'd like to see the data.
We did look at it, and it's really hard to I mean, like, it's used a lot. It's really hard to cluster this, because there's so many different use cases. And the bigger problem is, as I said, the hours I spent with authors trying to explain that actually there's no real definition. You can use it, or like the whole ISG does, because it comes over and over again frequently in our reviews. On your second point, I think that would be really nice, but I think that's a separate thing. That's either a separate procedure, or maybe it's just a tooling question. But I don't think it's the exact same topic.
Yeah, Mark, one thing is like, yeah, I did spend some time on it. I'll see if I can put some kind of like statistics together. It's not like, it's a bit fuzzy. Like, you know, I kind of do this like loss causes thing. I do go look at like a lot of RFCs, but I'll see if I can come up with some kind of summary. But it's not even like close to majority of the things being amends, right? Like, you know, people use it for like all kind of things, and that's like one thing. And for the C also being references, the issue is like, you cannot add references into an RFC that's been published. So I'm fully with you. Like, I would really like to go where we update things in place. Like, I'm like, you know, count my vote in for it. Like, so if that's something you're going to do, like, I would say, like, you know, let's kill this, right? But until then, I would like to keep this at least like going to see if we can get something better than today on the updates stuff.
So I think we need to cut the queue here, because we are already going on the other presentation time. So there was a question that was, what's the mailing list to openly discuss this work? I think it's an important question.
Yeah, so currently we send some requests for feedback on the RC interest.
RC interest, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's the right place.
So that does bring us to the real dispatch question. Is this, are you looking to just have this conversation in RFC dispatch and you'll figure out what to do there, or?
RFC interest, yes.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're at the stage where we really need more input. We got a few people saying that they think this is useful. We didn't get like too many, or like we didn't get only very few concerns, but nobody's saying this is like really bad, please don't do it. But we need more input.
You may have not gotten many concerns because we were back in the queue.
No, I'm like, for the feedback that we gathered up to now.